Increase the power. I want to hear the cries of a future being born.
Welcome, Gothamites, to another episode of the Arkham Sessions. My name is Brian Ward. With me, as always, the psychologist to the superheroes, superheroines, and supervillains of Gotham City, and now somewhere in upstate New York. She's Dr. Drea Letamendi. Hello, Drea.
Hi, Brian. How are you?
I am doing very well. I'm super excited. This has been an excellent week for us. It has been a long week for us. For some strange reason, holiday weeks are always the longest, but it has been an excellent week. We have a few things that we can either announce or at least hint upon. For starters, though, happy anniversary.
Thank you. Happy anniversary to you.
Last weekend was our anniversary. And for those of you who are new to the podcast, there were years where people weren't sure if we were an item. A lot of people would text or send messages via Twitter or email saying, please get together. What they didn't know was we already were. And
some folks...
They thought there was a possibility.
Knew. Some folks could read between the lines.
Right.
And they picked up on the subtleties of...
of being basically an old married couple who have a podcast together. No, and now we're celebrating 6 years of wedded bliss, and happy anniversary.
Well, happy anniversary. And I don't necessarily... You use the word item, and I know that's slang, but you are much more than... you are a celestial being.
Oh... I see what you're doing there. Okay, so that being said, there are a couple of other additional announcements. Let's do one that is not Arkham Sessions related. Today, you were announced to be a major part of a project that I have already talked about on this show, that I was announced to be a part of. Why don't you tell the good folks what you're going to be doing soon?
It's just been announced today that I am one of the players in the ProgCore D&D actual play.
Right. So what does an actual play mean for those who are not D&Ders?
I just think that's a term that just means like you're playing a tabletop game. I don't know how else to describe it.
Yeah.
But you've mentioned ProgCore before.
Yeah.
It's this like multi experienced collection of all these cool things that Todd Stashwick and David Nett are putting together that much more will be revealed. But right now is really about embracing the essence of fantasy,
right?
Tabletop gaming.
Right.
And when I say essence, that means different things for different people. But for this theme or this I guess tone of playing in particular, it's really about
podlings. Stealing podlings' essence.
It's about the essence. We always manage to make at least one Dark Crystal reference.
Yeah.
In these episodes. No, it's fundamentally about capturing those very imaginative, curious feelings that a lot of people had while they were originally getting familiar with D&D and similar fantasy role-playing tabletop games. And I am super excited to be a part of it because, for one, I get to play tabletop games with my friends. But second, these are all the things that I actually grew up with and loved, just in terms of the influences on the storytelling and on the the spirit of ProgCore.
Yeah.
Like the Dark Crystal.
Yeah, we should say that the spirit of of progcore exists in the late 70s, early 80s. So The Last Unicorn, one of your all-time favorites, Flight of the Dragons, The Dark Crystal, Legend, Conan the Barbarian, Excalibur, all the things that brought up those feelings in your belly of, well, I'm going to use the three words that they lean on the most: wonder, mystery, and danger. And the idea of progcore is not a new game; it's a system of gaming. It's a way that you can infuse wonder, mystery, and danger, and sort of get those feelings back. Especially if you've been playing a long time, sometimes it's not easy to feel that again. Mm-hmm. And so that's what Todd and David are doing. And they're trying to sort of throw it back to when they started playing games. You and I were relatively new gamers, but they're trying to bring that feeling back. And so far, they've done a magnificent job with the talent they have brought on this project. And I'm very happy to find out that you will be playing D&D in the progcore style on the documentary style actual play that they've been hinting at and teasing, which I will be directing. So I'm happy to work with you, Drea, once again.
Well, I had no choice in that part, but
what other names were brought up?
Oh my gosh, Felicia Day.
Felicia Day will be a part of it.
Yuri Lowenthal. Myself, Mark
Mm-hmm.
Bernardin.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, Todd Stashwick will be another player in the game. So and David Nett will be our DM. So look, I mean, if folks like D&D and love the foundational fantasy elements of D&D, I'd say this is really their thing. If you're like me and you're a little bit newer, I started playing several years ago, just right before the pandemic. I think for me, it still really grabs my attention and allows me to embrace the things that I love, because growing up as a nerd, I was just really immersed in fantasy, science fiction, and storytelling. And that's really what it comes to. It's a style of storytelling. Yeah. And it's meant to be imaginative and risky and uncertain and unknown, and also very joyful. And, I think the balance of those different feelings is what they're going for. Mm-hmm. Not to say that other games don't have those elements, but there's just this nice intentionality about that. Yeah. We really want to savor that. So I'm excited to be a part of it. Check out our socials. We'll be posting quite a bit of this in the next month or two. Yep. And stay tuned for the actual play.
Yeah. You can find more information on progcore by going to progcorefantasy.com. And when I say progcore, it's sort of like prog rock, if you're old enough to remember what prog rock is, progressive rock. It's progcore fantasy.com for more information. Finally, let's hint at something we're not allowed to talk about.
We are not supposed to say anything about Comic-Con yet.
Are we not? You know what? We're going. We'll be there. We're always there. And we are going to have a panel. I'm just going to say it. We're going to have it. I can't tell you what it is. I can't tell you what it's about. I can't tell you when or where it is, except that it will be in San Diego sometime during Comic-Con. But the reason I am so excited to talk about it is it might be one of our biggest panels, in my opinion, in recent history for Arkham Sessions, especially. It's going to be a fun one.
They've all been fun.
They have all been fun. I'm I'm always excited about the new one coming up. Like that's how I am. It's less about the things we've done and more about the things we've got coming.
That's really on brand for your personality style.
Yes. Yes.
Well, I'll agree. It's going to be a ton of fun. My personality style is to ruminate about all the things that are going to go wrong about it. So I'm not going to say too much other than when we're allowed to announce this, we will definitely put it on the Discord. Discord folks learn about things, by the way, before anyone else does. Typically, Patreon is also a place where you can go, but that's where you'll get actual like material from us. You'll get announcements and things like that and content. But Discord is where I'll jump in there and I'll announce things more informally, but it's also one of the first places you'll hear from us.
Speaking of Discord and other places where you can find us online, we will definitely drop that information to you later, but it's time to start thinking, unfortunately, about the fact that we only have 3 episodes of X-Men Season 1 left, Drea. That means it's just about time for folks online to start submitting their ideas for what we can cover next. Maybe it'll be X-Men Season 2. Maybe it'll be Season 2 of something else. Maybe it'll be something entirely different. We will take those ideas. We will present them to folks online on our Discord, on Twitter or X or Instagram or whatever. And then ultimately the people who get to decide will be the folks on Patreon. And they have steered us well so far. We've always enjoyed what they have selected for us. X-Men was something that they selected for us, and we're really happy that they did. But it's time to start thinking about it. As much of a shock as that is, we will let you know where to submit your ideas for what we're going to cover next at the end of the show. Until then, let's talk about Come the Apocalypse, which basically is, as you like to joke, a direct continuation of the last episode,
It was.
The Cure.
It just kind of rolled right into it. So I'm going to need to know from you a little bit more about Apocalypse, because what the show does is just insert him into the story. We don't have a background.
He's always like behind some door.
Oh, he pops in and he's there. And there wasn't a, it's kind of interesting actually with Apocalypse. This character wasn't introduced in any kind of formal way. He appears, he's in the corners, he's behind doors, and he is a massive, militarized mechanical monster guy. He's clearly been driven by this quest to eradicate both humans and mutants, which is interesting.
His name is Apocalypse, after all.
He certainly, I don't know if he named himself or if someone else named him. You might know.
I do know that Apocalypse is not his original name. I will not tell you what it was. I will not tell you what it was because I don't want to break our rules, which is we have not seen the origin of Apocalypse in this series so far, and there's a lot to be said about it.
And people have called you out on bringing in information that we haven't seen on screen. Well, let me say this, just my hot take as a psychologist on what we've seen so far.
Okay.
With Apocalypse, he is a massive figure, massive guy, monstrous looking.
Mm-hmm.
I just, I want to be careful as I describe this, but it's very clear that he does not look human. He looks to be some kind of hybrid combination of mechanical parts and organic carbon parts, and the way he speaks is monotone and menacing, and he kind of has a limited vocabulary, fixated on his mission to eradicate all beings except the slaves that serve him.
And we should remind folks that the slaves that we're talking about are created through the machine that in the previous episode was promised to be a cure for mutanthood. And it was then revealed that it doesn't actually cure you of being a mutant. It simply makes you a slave, thus making Apocalypse more powerful.
Well, and so there's some understanding, again, assuming that Apocalypse is the guy who designed this whole scheme, is that he understands logically that many mutants are looking for some way to hide, erase, and even eliminate their mutant powers. So there's some understanding there. It's almost like he's leveraging or manipulating mutants' psychology in order to do this bait and switch.
He's tricking them into volunteering to be his army.
So he lures them in through this scientist who is actually Mystique. Mystique is code switching, i.e. shape-shifting as this, lab coat wearing scientist.
Yeah.
And she is in service to Apocalypse. So
she has been promised by Apocalypse not to become a slave because she has voluntarily begun working with him in order to recruit mutants. Now, I want to ask you a question about the mutants that are being recruited. As you said, he's manipulating the fact that they don't want their mutant abilities anymore. I find myself wondering if maybe what that is Apocalypse saying, look, you don't appreciate what you've been given? I'm going to start using what you've been given.
Wait, what do you mean by that?
Like, you don't appreciate the gifts that you've received as a mutant, having been born a mutant. Okay, I'm going to convert you into one of my slaves so that I can appreciate the gifts you've been given and use those to my advantage.
Got it. So I'm going to weaponize your powers.
Yes.
Through this, again, this big lie where you come in thinking your lives are going to be better, but in reality, I'm going to brainwash you. I mean, there's some parts, it's both mental and physical.
Correct.
They are, we get to actually see what happens when someone goes into this machine and is
Yeah, I bit my
converted.
lip last episode where we were talking about Warren Worthington III, and I was like, who, by the way? And then I'm like, ooh, I should not say that he becomes Archangel. And so in this episode, we see what happens to him in the very beginning. He is shot with this powerful laser. What this laser is doing, we don't know. But when we see Angel, Warren Worthington III, who's been financing this entire thing from the beginning, we then see that his organic feathery wings have been removed. He is no longer Caucasian. He is now blue-skinned. Still has that amazing blonde hair, though.
But he's metallic. Like, he's blue-skinned and metallic.
Yeah, his wings are metallic. And we don't see the rest of his body because it's all covered up by his skin-tight suit. But
Oh, that's not him? I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I know.
We're going down this path. But he is now no longer considered Angel. He is no longer considered Warren Worthington III. In fact, he even says that Warren Worthington III is no longer here. He then,
Yikes.
in my opinion, prematurely refers to himself as Archangel. In the comics, he does not become Archangel until after he denounces his affiliation with Apocalypse.
Okay.
But if you're going to have a character like Apocalypse, you're going to need your four horsemen of the Apocalypse. Of course, a reference to the biblical book of Revelation, ushering in the end of the world. And you have your classic four horsemen. You have pestilence. You have famine. You have death. And you have, pestilence, famine, death.
War.
War. Yeah. And so he takes these characters that we've been seeing over the last couple of episodes, these characters who have met down at the local pub, and they're all talking about how they want their cure. They want their opportunity. A character that comes in looking very much like Warren comes in without his wings. How you would know, we don't know, because he's still wearing the big puffy coat. But he announces, my wings are gone, my mutant ability is gone. Go get your cure right now. And sure enough, members of the community do go in. I can't help but to notice that the characters that are going in are Morlocks, who we have already met and we've already discussed do not pass as humans. So of course.
And let me explain when we say do not pass.
Yeah.
When we say passing or they pass, we mean that these mutants have mutant features that are more outward, visible, salient, and more likely to increase discriminative treatment, right? Discriminatory treatment.
And ultimately displeasure with your own existence because of all of this negative attention.
So we talked last time about the, I thought you named this well, the dysmorphic experiences of being in a body that you feel is causing you painful experiences. Now, of course, we understand that that in and of itself isn't necessarily an illness. It's because of the social environment you're in and how you're treated. So context really matters here. We got an interesting question off of Discord about how certain mutants might be, kind of reacting to their mutant identity in different ways. Do you want to go ahead and read that?
Oh, absolutely. So Trevor over at Discord asked, with the topics in the most recent episode, I happen to notice something. Is it just me, or does it seem like all the members of the Brotherhood of Mutants have no shame of the mutant genes? I can't think of many or even any members that would want to go through the treatment that Rogue and Warren wanted. Is there a reason more members of the X-Men are uncomfortable with themselves compared to the members of the Brotherhood? Does it have something to do with the Brotherhood thinking themselves superior? And I think that's an excellent topic of conversation. Is it because I think they think themselves superior and are therefore more comfortable? I don't know. Possibly. But ultimately, he's hitting on, yes, the people who are more confident in themselves, the people who are more comfortable with who they are as people, as Homo superior, they don't want the cure. They don't need the cure. It doesn't even occur to them to go get the cure because they do have a comfort in their own bodies. And in some cases, that might be a body that doesn't look like a human being.
Right.
You might be furry, or you might be in some other way what normies would consider grotesque. And yet, because you are comfortable with yourself in your own skin and with your own abilities, the cure is never even a question in your mind. However, then we've got people like Rogue. We've got people like Warren, people who just desperately want to be normal. And
then on further down the spectrum are the Morlocks, who we could argue that the reason more of those community members want the cure is that they have these, visible features that are less normal looking. And in fact, some of them just don't look human.
Well, and they're not allowed to go live up at the school. I mean, they are allowed. They were invited by Storm, but they're not allowed to go live their again, quote unquote, normie lives. They live down in the sewers. They're underground dwellers. They're not living their best lives. So it's easy to not be comfortable with yourself.
Maybe they just need to join the Brotherhood.
Well, so that's the thing. And that's why I think that the X-Men is a brilliantly written comic, because I cannot fault the Brotherhood for this. Like the Brotherhood of Mutants are ostensibly a villainous group. And yet really all they're doing is saying, why would you give this up? Why would you cease being who you were born to be?
Like you're believing the lie.
Right.
The lie
Yes.
is that you're less than. The lie
Yes.
is that you're subhuman. The lie is that you're a second-class citizen. The lie is that you should be exterminated.
Right.
like come to reality. The reality is that you have powers.
Yeah.
The reality is that you are actually magnificent.
Right.
You've transcended.
And this is Magneto's
the
point.
average
That's
person.
why he refers to them as Homo superior. He
Sure.
does believe that the mutant race are superior to the human race. However, I don't think that all of the mutants who belong to the Brotherhood necessarily feel superior. I just think they feel, I was going to say insanely comfortable, but that's more of a hyperbolic descriptor. They are just intensely comfortable with who they are, and maybe
so
not
interesting.
mystique.
It's so interesting because you're looking for a word for it. You're looking for a way to describe a person who simply feels in alignment with the body that they're in, and that alignment, that sense of being egosyntonic, which I've mentioned before, like that your thoughts and feelings and self-awareness is in alignment with the body that you're in. Not just that you have that sense of identity agreement, but that you also have values, expectations, and perspectives in your world that allow you to feel equal.
Yeah.
Allows you to feel that you are, I want to say, like, relentlessly protected from the messages that you're less than. Like, there's no way that's getting in.
Yeah.
No way.
You're going to be surrounded by people who are supportive of that. And I want to say that the X-Men are trying to be that, but are failing miserably. I think about Scott.
Yeah.
Right?
Talk about Scott's reaction.
His waffling back and forth with trying to figure out. He's not waffling back and forth as if he himself is uncomfortable, but he has various degrees of anger toward people who don't like their mutant abilities or want to escape the real world and go somewhere else. We think back to the episode with Genosha, or that introduced Genosha as being this sort of secure place for mutants. And the moment Gambit simply brought up the idea of checking the place out, even if on vacation, they nearly came to blows in the X Manor, and Xavier came in and said, "Hey, let's calm down. Maybe we should check this place out." And then that's when he sent Gambit, Storm, and Jubilee to pose as guests in Genosha. And we know what happened at that point. But then in the last episode, The Cure, Scott very calmly and sadly, I might add, explains some people may not want to be mutants, and might be uncomfortable, and so he almost sounds like in this moment he himself could be potentially on that list. Now, I don't think there was ever really a possibility that Scott Summers was going to be included on that list, but he does sort of have this tone of regret. And it's possibly for those around him who feel this way. But then he jumps right back to anger in this episode when they come in, when Warren, who's actually Mystique, comes in and says, "Hey, I'm cured. You too can be cured. Just go right up the hill to that big, weird facility." And he gets in between Warren, aka Mystique, and the group and starts yelling and saying, "They don't need to be cured. There's nothing wrong with them. They are," like he becomes militantly aggressive about the idea that you should be changing yourself because you don't fit in with society. And I feel like this aggression, while coming from a good place, is not nearly as positive of reinforcement as we are seeing from Magneto's camp, if that makes sense.
Because he's not fully invested psychologically in those words. I mean, because I agree with you. I think he's not got himself figured out. I think that Cyclops is still wrestling with his own sense of awareness and sense of confidence in who he is.
Yeah, especially when it comes to him being the de facto leader. I think he senses a significant amount of pressure and gets frustrated when other people don't agree with him or don't see eye to eye with where he is on the whole scope of being a mutant.
And he's battling with what he feels, it's hard to describe, like what he feels he should feel. Right. And so some of this to me is giving performative support. It's giving this, loudness.
Yeah.
And seemingly supportive activism. And yet I'm like, this guy doesn't have it figured out. Like he still is not yet confident in himself. And so that's why you and I are both reacting to the way in which he's supposedly an advocate for the mutants who are suffering. And I wonder if you could, there's this scene where in that same bar, Professor X explains why some of the mutants would look for a cure. It's a really interesting kind of almost a montage of, I know we won't have all the video here, but at least we'll have the audio of the way he's describing the reactions.
Yeah, I did pull that. Let's take a listen.
They haven't learned how to live at ease with their mutant powers, so they're frustrated. Some lash out, while some have turned inward, letting their bitterness consume them. But they all feel dissatisfied with themselves and alone.
You've given us a place where we belong, Professor.
Just takes us hard-headed ones longer to realize it.
Forget about it, Rogue. We've all had a hard time accepting who we are.
He's being such a good counselor here, in a way, right?
Or is he just trying to win you over with some sugar?
I know I've been pretty skeptical and rather harsh with Professor X, but I think here he's doing such a fantastic job as a therapist, but also as like a leader and as an educator. Like this is, again, we're in this bar and people are talking about this cure, and these are very personal feelings and ideas and values, and some of them are combative. Like some of these ideas are not in sync with one another. And I think Professor X understands that this idea of the cure will really divide mutants.
Yeah.
And that's very difficult. But he explains it and he says, look, this can be very frustrating for some mutants. They're going through a grief and loss period with understanding what it's like to have a mutant identity in a world that wants to persecute you and literally annihilate you. Mm-hmm. We've just heard this guy Apocalypse say in a handful of words, he's out there to exterminate everybody, but especially mutants. Like that's the idea. So, and that's not the first time we've heard that rhetoric. And so Professor X does this really careful and thoughtful expression of like, everyone is going to react to this oppressive identity related trauma differently. And we even see, now they're mostly Morlocks, but we kind of see the withdrawal. We see the angry reactions. He names some of these emotional responses. And I want to, and he didn't go as far as maybe I would have liked, but I want to bring in something we've talked about before around the neurobiology of trauma, especially identity related trauma. And we have talked on the show before about the different reactions that essentially are driven by our nervous system. And that could be, of course, fight, flight, freeze, or
Fawn.
But what we haven't done is talk about kind of the protective mechanisms that exist in that reaction, or in those reactions, that those reactions have a lot to do with survivorship. And that's what a lot of these mutants are going through and experiencing. Some people or some mutants may quickly mobilize in the face of oppression. So who might that be? That's Rogue, right? Like, in a way, that's fight. That's like,
Magneto for sure.
Magneto, Rogue, these are maybe the Brotherhood, but this is like, I'm gonna gather my resources and really like be loud about this. This is not okay. I'm gonna use all of this cortisol in my trauma response and mobilize myself and others. And whereas before, of course, fight is a reaction that could be really maladaptive. Mm-hmm. There could be something pretty good about that. Flight might also be kind of adaptive, right? When you're seeing really dangerous situations that might be a life or death situation for you, flight, meaning I've got, escaping, I've got to get out of here, is a survival mechanism. It's not necessarily bad.
And this would be all the characters who opted to go to Genosha, like to avoid conflict over on the mainland or somewhere else, and instead just flee to some place where they would be accepted.
I mean, even the Morlocks, as poorly situated as they are, look, the benefit of not staying too long in places where you're mistreated, devalued, undermined, disrespected, oppressed, the benefit of fleeing is protection and community and safety. But, the challenges that come with that is the continued and persistent thoughts of, being less than and wondering when this terror will end. Of course, there's the way that some of us face oppression is with freeze, and that's kind of like the disconnection. And Professor X mentions that you see some of these mutants withdraw and kind of like let themselves fade away a bit. They're not really using their powers. They're not really integrated with society. They might be startled and shocked, and they're kind of...
So you're talking about someone like Warren, who is not actively using his powers unless he absolutely needs to. Instead, he prefers to sort of hide them, but he's also trying to flee in some...
And that's
like,
okay.
Who is free? Like, who would freeze sort of correspond to in this particular scenario?
Who would we see as someone who's freezing? Scott might be someone who's freezing.
Okay.
And I say that not necessarily to say he's not doing anything, but is he fully committed to what he's doing?
Yeah.
What's interesting is that there's, this happens to me a lot where like hours later, I'm like, I should have said, please don't talk to me like that. I should have said, please treat me with more respect. Or I should have said, as an ally, I should have stepped in. All of us, many of us have these like should haves hours later at night when we're in bed. Like, why didn't I behave differently? That's kind of a freeze reaction. And I think Scott does some of that in his head. Like, he wants to be better. He wants to be a better advocate and ally. And also for himself, he doesn't necessarily maybe protect himself as effectively as he could have.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we know about fawning, which is...
literally what Rogue did right in front of Apocalypse during the famous meme shot, just dropping to the ground. No, she was fighting. Let's be clear.
She was definitely
fighting.
She was fighting. Well, fawning is wanting to really diffuse the danger and create more safety for yourself. And it's really sometimes hard to detect. It's when you have someone who's really a pleaser. And let me just use these words because people will understand this. You try to be a good one. You try to be one of the good ones. What can you do to be likable? What can you do to be accepted? How do you use your non-mutant facets and familiarities to get in with the good, on people's good side? And Beast, who we have not seen in a while because he's in jail.
He's still fawning.
This guy has figured it out. Like, this is formulaic for Beast. He gets it. He really gets it. I wish we had more
Well, he gets all the
screen time.
books that he could possibly want. He's getting Gene's cookies. He gets 3 squares a day. He gets to hang from rafters and, probably gets to work out a little bit. Beast has got a good thing going when you say he's figured it out.
Let me just say, like, typically the rebel who is fighting is more likely the one who's going to end up incarcerated. Like, that Beast, up until this point, has been an intellectual.
Yes.
So he's known how to talk to his oppressors and almost like intellectualize his way into their hearts. And of course, he's also very compassionate and is seriously so well-rounded that a part of that, I wonder, is a part of fawning. Like, he has to do something to ameliorate and alleviate the amount of horror someone might see or someone might experience when they see him, because he looks like a monster. Now, look, I've been holding out on you because there's one more F. There's one more F that I never shared with you.
Okay.
Are you ready?
I don't know if I am or not. What could that possible final F be?
It is tend and befriend. Now, where is the F? It's friend. But tend and befriend is one's ability to use all of this activation, like all the activated feelings and all those stress hormones. And that is a call to action to find community. And that's Professor X. Let me help people to see the strengths in themselves, to find togetherness and find collective power. And even through that, you find safety, you find joy, you find acceptance. And therefore, through that self-development, through that self-empowerment, others will be able to see all the wonderful things about our community. Now, that last part may or may not happen. And in some cases, it may not matter as much as someone's internal ability to feel accepted and validated genuinely by another person, right? So tend and befriend is very likely a trauma response that is seen as more adaptive. Like, you're using all of those stress hormones and all that, activated nervous system stuff to like push you toward finding connection.
And you're basically diffusing the situation, and
you're pushing through the trauma, not by avoiding it or necessarily fighting it directly, but by transferring that energy into something that's more socially effective for you.
That's interesting. That assumes that fight is literal. You are aggressive and you coming out swinging. Tend and befriend almost to me seems like a section of fight, in that it seems proactive to me. It seems like you are going to combat aggressive stressors with some other form of
Sure, and I don't want to simplify it by saying there's a maladaptive and an adaptive version of each of these, but I totally get what you're saying, which is, the term is fight, but it's really kind of like this activism, this ability to tolerate the hardship in order to make significant change and improve your well-being and possibly the well-being of the people in your community. So the term fight, maybe implies more aggressive behaviors, but it doesn't have to be.
Right.
It can be intellectual. Someone could write me today and say, like, I think Beast is not fawning. I think Beast is fighting, and Beast is fighting through these incredible, sophisticated powers that he has: his intellect, his ability to perceive other people well, which is his emotional intelligence, his genius level innovation, which allows him to find solutions. Like, his executive functioning is off the charts. I could easily just be convinced that that's fight more than it is fawn.
Right. I want to ask you a question, and this, I'm so glad that we are going in order from one episode to the next, because it really does give us a greater scope of the story as a whole. And I feel like they have smartly introduced us to characters and situations in order to get us to this moment. And I want to ask about the Morlocks and the fact that there was an episode with them where we were introduced to them and their leader, Callisto, where Callisto fought Storm for leadership of the Morlocks. And in that episode, Storm basically tried to overcome her sort of self doubt and her fear of enclosed spaces by going down into the sewers where the Morlocks lived. She then went into combat with Callisto, and she won as leader of the Morlocks. Now, one could say that what she did at the end of that battle, which was essentially hand leadership back to Callisto. She said, look, I'm going to go back to where I live. You can remain here. No one's going to do anything to hurt you. Callisto will be my right-hand person until I decide to come back one day. You know, like she was sort of doing the gracious victor sort of thing, where it's like, I won, but really you didn't lose. But she offered them the chance to come up, and she said, you can come to the X Manor anytime you want. And they basically denied that, saying, look, we can't pass up there. That's not where we belong. And you think, okay, I get it. I get what they're thinking. However, if the new leader of the Morlocks said, no, I am now your leader, follow me, I will take you to the promised land, which is a place where you will receive sanctuary, you will receive food, you will never have to steal from a vendor on the street again, you will never have to fight for your existence unless you're fighting against Magneto or some other.
You're talking about the
Juggernaut.
X-Mansion.
X-Mansion.
Sure.
Like come with me and I will show you the way. Is that an example of the X-Men again turning their back on their own mutant kind and being like, maybe because Storm, and I realize I can already hear the people going, what is he talking about? By Storm allowing them to have their own rigid belief system in as to whether or not they pass or could pass
Right.
up on top as surface dwellers, are the X-Men doing a disservice to the Morlocks, which then eventually lead them to Muir Island? 3 of the Morlocks become the horsemen of the apocalypse. Plague becomes Pestilence. Autumn Rolfson becomes Famine. And something they didn't mention about Autumn, and I'm kind of glad we didn't really get to know.
No, I don't even know that they gave these folks names in the episode.
Autumn in the comics, Autumn, she lives with anorexia. Like she is super thin and skinny, and she has the ability to sort of make other people starve.
Oh my gosh.
And so obviously Apocalypse is going to be like, oh, you're my
Right.
Famine.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're going to be that. And then you've got, and I kid you not, his name is Abraham Lincoln Quiros.
Okay.
He then becomes War. He has the ability to clap and cause explosions. And of course, you're going to pick that person to be War. And Plague, of course, is going to be Pestilence. Like,
Sure.
Obviously there are 3 perfect Morlocks for this situation. But if those 3 Morlocks, at least Plague was part of that episode with Storm. I can't remember if the other 2 made direct appearances or not. But if they had gone up to X Manor would they be in this position today?
Like before all this,
If Storm had brought them up,
sure. I mean, why not?
Yeah,
I mean,
would they?
You're right.
Would they find themselves? Is it possible that the Brotherhood of Mutants is a better organization than the X-Men? Because I can't imagine Magneto or any member of that team not looking at them and going, no. You belong with us.
Look at X-97.
Celebrate yourself.
Although we're not allowed to talk about X-97.
We're not allowed to talk about X-Men 97.
But in X-97, you have an example of how loving Magneto can be toward the Morlocks. And let me say, if you're trying to say that the Brotherhood is actually more inclusive and accepting of mutants, you might be right.
Even in their name, the Brotherhood of Mutants, we're all together in this.
Yeah.
We're all, now, of course, they also become known as the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants at times.
Shoot.
But
What am I signing up for?
But even the name is more inclusive than X-Men.
Sure.
I'm just going to name this team after me.
Well, X-Men. I thought X-Men just meant like you have the mutant gene. Like you have the X.
Do you think it's a coincidence that it's named after, or that Charles Xavier?
No, I think it's named after X-Man, who is an actual mutant somewhere.
Okay.
Because I think there's an
X-Man. This is just multiple of them. This is these are the X-Men.
I don't know.
And I think there's a reason why Charles will use terms like my X-Men.
Sure.
By the way, I gotta say that we're not allowed to talk about X-Men 97, but if you turn that into a drinking game, the number of times the X-Men were used as property in that series, the number of times people were like, my X-Men, come to me, my X-Men, oh, my X-Men, what's going on?
I don't hate that. It's an allegiance. It's a community. It's like, a call to action.
I don't want to be known as anyone's
thing.
Anything.
Fair.
Like this is our team, not your team. Like I'm not a member of your team. I'm a member of our team.
Yeah. Ultimately, and this is what makes X-Men stand out as a series of storytelling in comics and in animation, especially compared to things that we've covered before, is that so much of this is about survivorship.
Yeah.
And how does one overcome this daily oppression, and what is the right answer? And this episode actually ends with no solution, no answer.
It ends to be continued.
It's another to be continued, but Apocalypse, of course, there's a giant fight scene in the X-Men battle Apocalypse and the four horsemen. And
Rogue, who wanted the cure, then at the end of the last episode decided that she instead was going to embrace who she is as a person. She is the one who gets to take some of that evil that Apocalypse put into Warren, now known as Archangel. He was Death. So if you've got the Four Horsemen, he was Death. And she then touches him, bare skin to bare skin, and removes what Apocalypse has done to him, at least everything she can. She can't make him what he once was. And she even says at one point, like, some of that evil is in me. I have that now. I live with that burden now.
And what does he do? He flees.
He flees, but he does say, hopefully you're stronger.
Literal flight.
Yeah, literally.
Literal flight.
Yeah. He does say, hopefully you have the strength to handle it, because I sure didn't. And so,
Bye.
And I think she does. I don't
Sure.
think that's, but
she's the one who can.
And then yes, he flies off toward the moon, to go live his life as Archangel now. But yeah, and have we seen the last of, the Horsemen? I can tell you, though we've not seen them up to this point, these aren't the original Horsemen. There have been other incarnations.
Great.
Which just goes to show you that just when you think Apocalypse is down, he may not be.
The thing about Apocalypse is that it's almost like Thanos in a way, but less of a reason. At least Thanos had a reason. Like, this guy is just transferring his trauma to the max. This is an example. Again, I don't know anything about him, but he comes up here and he's just transferring all of his trauma on a global scale.
Yeah.
Exterminate everybody.
Yeah.
That's my decision. But I don't know why he's doing that. And the language he uses is there's a lot of terror around that language. Words like exterminate. I'm the instrument to purify the world. This is
and he did say in The Cure, he did say, I know more about this world than you could possibly dream of, and that's why I must destroy it. So
what's going on there?
He knows
What's happening?
something that he believes no one else does, and it could be because of maybe hint, hint, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, just how long he's been here. And so
Okay.
I'm not going to cover any more than that because, again, we were just introduced to him, and he's still a mysterious and wonderful and dangerous figure. Hashtag Procor. But
He will free you of the pain caused by your own mutancy.
yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's interesting, here's the last thing I'll say about this episode is that it made mythical sense around the horsemen, like why they turned into those four figures. But there is an interesting component here where even though it wasn't a willful transition, these four people had already committed to changing their lives.
Yeah.
And they were transformed into another being. Now, I understand that
They got cool mechanized horses.
I understand that some part of their psychology was still there buried in the back.
Yeah.
But that this new very, I don't know, automaton style. I don't know how to, it's almost like the Sentinel situation, but not. Like
I see what you're saying,
like
yeah.
they were in service to
It wasn't
Apocalypse.
plague anymore. Now it was definitely pestilence. Like didn't look like plague anymore. Didn't act like plague anymore.
Right.
Was now a militarized weapon for apocalypse.
There you go.
Using
Yes.
the same powers that she already had. Mm-hmm. Now she is pestilence. Right.
Yeah, I don't know. There's this idea then that they became these other figures. They became someone. They sort of like transitioned to these. I think that's right. These weaponized slaves, and that's horrific. Like that's traumatic, and it also I think raises questions for me around a solution, like you said, one solution to wanting to be out of this body that you were born with is another version of like self-erasure, self-mutilation, suicide. These people are no longer there.
Yeah.
They've left this world. It's really, and again, I know they didn't ask to be slaves for Apocalypse, but it's sort of this self-extermination that I find really interesting as a part of this story. And you know how I said that it's really important to think about what's egocentric?
Yeah.
What feelings, thoughts, ideas, wishes, desires are actually in alignment with who you are.
Yeah.
And I guess Apocalypse kind of takes that from these folks, because in a way, if they're saying, I really do need to reconcile how I feel in this body, they don't get a choice for how that's, what solution, because they think the solution is to not be a mutant. Does that make sense? So there's something about this that makes me uncomfortable around, of course he's a villain, but they came into this with agency and with an interest to essentially align themselves with their bodies. And this villain lures them in because they have this dysmorphia.
Yeah.
And then almost almost amplifies the very parts of them that they said, that wasn't me. That's not who I am. That's not a part of me.
He used their bodies and chucked their minds.
Yeah.
You know, like
Yeah.
like what makes you you is actually your mind, not your body. And yet he went, great, you don't like this about yourself? Well, I need that.
Yeah.
So I just need the mind to vacate, and we're going to go ahead and just get rid of that. And then I'm going to also armor you, and I'm going to give you additional weapons, and I'm going to call you something different. And it almost makes me wonder too, if it was just a sheer coincidence that the first three mutants that came in, aside from Death, aka Archangel, happened to have the abilities to have plagues and war and
Right.
you know, like he needed 4 horsemen and he got them.
They were just right for that.
What was he like? Hey, Mystique, could you do me a favor? I appreciate all these other people you're bringing to me, but could you find somebody who's got something to do with plagues? And could you have somebody that's got something to do with famine and war? Because I really need the cool look of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse.
Well, I think what we're struggling with is we know this is a violation. We're just trying to articulate what kind of violation it is.
Yeah.
But overall,
and hopefully we'll have a lot more opportunity to dive into it as we explore more. There are 3 more episodes, and I think we're going to learn a little bit more about those things in those, because they are named after one of the most famous X-Men arcs of all time, The Days of Future Past.
I can't wait.
We will learn some stuff going forward. On the surface, this didn't seem like an episode that we would have a whole lot more to discuss, because it was sort of a continuation of The Cure. But I feel like we got a lot out of this episode.
Absolutely. The first 10 minutes of the episode was packed with ideas for me. And then the last, 12 minutes or so was mostly all of the optic blasts and the mind wipes and the explosions and this war going on. So we'll see him again, I suppose.
Yeah, maybe. We'll see. Drea, until next time, why don't you tell the good folks where they can find you online?
You can find me on my website, drdreapsychology.com. Please check out my Instagram at Dr. Drea Psychology. We mentioned the Discord. You can find that in the Arkham Sessions bio link. And then finally, check out progcorefantasy.com.
Yeah. You can find me. I am on Instagram at B_Ward028. You can find us both on Instagram at the Arkham Sessions. Come follow us on Twitter. We don't really use it very much anymore, but you're more than welcome to come see what we've posted in the past. You can also come follow us on Facebook. Drea already mentioned Discord. You can come to patreon.com/Arkham Sessions and join our Patreon, where we've got additional conversations happening and additional other little perks. One of which is to have your name called out as a supporter of the show. And we'll do that right now. We've got a couple of folks to thank: Aaron Winrick, Mike Ficklin, and Jamiroquai J. I'm not going to say your full name. You know why. But we want to thank you guys for making this episode and all of our episodes possible. If you want your name called out in the next episode of the podcast, just go to patreon.com/Arkham Sessions, join the $5 tier, and that'll get you a call out in the next episode. Jamiroquai, you've also got a challenge coin headed your way. You joined the tier that allows you to pick up one of those rare challenge coins from 2020.
Wow,
and
that might be our last challenge coin of
if
2020.
it's not, we have a tiny handful left, like maybe 3. And one of them is on its way to Minnesota.
Awesome.
this weekend. So enjoy that. Let us know when you receive it. And thanks for joining and being a part of our community. Till next time, I am Brian Ward.
I'm Dr. Drea Letamendi.
And together we are
The Arkham Sessions.
Who wants to be normal?